Hello. I think we're live. Maybe not. Yeah, good. Cool. Hello. Welcome to this afternoon History Chats once again. As always, we're going to get started in about 5 minutes when we go live here, about 12:30. But feel free to hang around if you're here live. If you're watching after the fact, just skip ahead a couple minutes and that'll get you right to the program. But yeah, those of you who are joining us live, thank you. It's good to have you join us on this afternoon here. I'm just going to try and I think this will work. Just checking something here. Sure, let's do that. Cool. I just got access to our Twitter account recently, so I was like, oh, I should probably tweet out that, because maybe there, who knows, maybe some of you are joining us from that. Who knows? Why not? Anyway, yeah, thanks for joining us this afternoon. We are going to be talking in just a short time here about the Hmong-Lao statue, Veterans Memorial, I should say, that is on the grounds of the Marathon County Courthouse as part of our Monumental History theme for this year, or for this year, this month for September. While we're waiting here, just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Yankee Bookstore, for making it possible for us to do these programs, as well as all of you, our members to the Historical Society. And as always, I like to always point out, if you're not already a member and you enjoy these programs, you enjoy local history, want to support Marathon County history, becoming a member is a great way to do that. Not only do you get, to support us, you also get the benefits of, some tickets at the Yaki House and some benefits, our newsletter and things like that. So encourage you to do that by visiting our website, marathoncountyhistory.org, or by giving us a call or coming on in person. But yeah, thanks to them for the sponsors and members. While I'm telling you about stuff, also, nope, not ready for that. There we go. We have some stuff coming up. So we are delighted to be part of the Central Wisconsin Book Festival once again. They're doing sort of a hybrid, some online events and some in-person events in limited places. Tomorrow evening, September 17th, at 7 p.m., we are actually going to be hosting one of the first events for that. Andrew Graff will be coming and doing a reading and a little bit of discussion about his new book, I think newish book, Raft of Stars. So yeah, come on in for that, or I think we're going to be trying to do some sort of digital version of that. We'll kind of let you know about that when we know the details. As well as check out, of course, all of the other great events that they have this year as part of the Central Wisconsin Book Festival. Yeah, for sure. And then also this weekend happens to be work out that we also have a History Speaks coming up. So we have the Grand Army of the Republic, the Union Veterans, and the most powerful veterans organization in American history. It's a great topic. Professor Bett Barker will be back. He knows this stuff. I'm sure it's going to be a great presentation. He always does a good job. And that'll be at 2 o'clock on Saturday. And that'll be all live here. We're not doing, not all digital. We're just going to stream that on Facebook and YouTube. We won't be doing in-person stuff for that. But nonetheless, it'd be a good discussion, I think, of a really interesting and maybe not something that's as well known these days, the Grand Army of the Republic. Anyway, I think that's the plugs for the events and everything. And I think maybe we'll just take this time and get started here. So let's see. Here we are. Hello. Yeah, today we are continuing, as I said, our monumental history, looking at the monuments and markers and statues of historical events. Before I get too far into it, I just want to say as well, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, clarifications, what have you, do feel free to put that in the chat. I will have some time at the end. I'll check that if there's anything outstanding, any questions or anything like that. So, do encourage you to do that. Anyway, as I said, today we're talking about the Hmong-Lao Veterans Memorial, which is on the courthouse grounds of the Marathon County Courthouse, and it is one of the more recent, and it certainly is one of the more, I would say, not to say that the World War I memorial or the Cutler Post statue of the Grand Army of the Republic, the Civil War veterans, aren't relevant today. But I think that this is because it's so new and because this is sort of grappling with things that people are still around from. It's a really interesting topic and in a way to look at our community and the history of it. So we're going to start by just talking about it. This is the statue itself. Actually, here I can bring up let's see here. Go back just to show you where we are. So we've got the courthouse here. If you're coming up on North 6th Street here, let's see, go back to the street view. Boop. So that's the Cutler Post statue on the corner there, and then now it's right here. So that's where it's located. I'm getting this picture, by the way, and actually I'm just going to say a bunch of pictures here. I'm just going to use the opportunity to cite some sources. We don't have a whole lot of archived images of the Lao Civil War or the Hmong experience for various reasons, and so I'm going to be borrowing some of the pictures from this book, which is great. This was the program from the dedication of this memorial, which was done in September of 2016. And as you can see, it's a granite statue. It's a big square statue. It's the base with the bronze statues on top. So the memorial has engravings here. At one point, they were interested in maybe engraving the names of all of the Hmong-Lao veterans, on the side, but they decided eventually to kind of just make it a very general thing. And so it has the explanation in here in English and in Hmong about who these guys were and what they did and why it's important. So it goes back, the history of how this came to be goes back to 2012. I'm sure it was percolating before that. There were some Hmong-Lao veterans sort of memorials and markers and things that have been put up since the 90s in various places across the country. But here, it started in 2012. They went, a group of individuals kind of pitched this to the county board. And the county administrator said, absolutely, let's do this. Let's put a statue or memorial on the courthouse grounds to this group of people. And so they created a planning committee to figure out, okay, what is this going to look like? How much is it going to cost? How do we raise the money? All the stuff you need to figure out for this. They went around, looked at other memorials, as you can see on the left, and then end up kind of settling on this site here, which we've already kind of taken a look at where that is. From 2014, they started to, once they had the kind of design, knew what they were going to go for, knew how much it was going to cost, and got approval to put it there. Started raising money, which is an important part of this. It ended up getting funded fairly quickly, within a year and a half, 2 years, I think. I'm not sure about the specifics of when they actually met the official goal, but it ended up costing about $240,000, which, yeah, bronze statues, not inexpensive. That's pretty expensive. They were helped by a lot of people, a lot of communities, businesses, organizations, families, many individuals contributed to this. There was also one in particular, a very generous anonymous donor who put up $100,000 in matching funds to kind of get us there. So ended up getting the money all situated. And then they had the groundbreaking in November of 2015. And of course, just like, the Hmong community themselves, they're making a marker in the same sort of, they want to be included as part of the other veterans that are represented on the courthouse grounds. So they're making a marker, but they're going to put their spin on it. And so they're not just going to, have some nice shovels and break ground. They're also going to have a shaman come. The shaman here is on the right. Kuli Mua, I think is his name, if I'm pronouncing that right. And then Mr. Zong here is a veteran. And so they did a blessing, it's incense and bless the site for this as well. And then, over the next year, they got the statue ready, installed it on September 19th, and dedicated it on the 24th. So that's the statue. I keep saying statue. That's the memorial. There's a statue as part of it, of course. And that's to the Hmong-Lao veterans. And I think this begs the question, though. Okay, this is a memorial for the Hmong-Lao veterans. Who are they? Who are the Hmong-Lao veterans? Who are we memorializing with this installation? So for that, we got to go back to Laos, right? Which is the Lao part of Hmong Lao here. So the Hmong themselves there's a long history going back. The attempts to try to trace the linguistic, ethnic group back into northern China and being over the centuries moving down and then getting persecuted in China. They lived in kind of central China and they were persecuted as an ethnic group. Sort of I don't know to what extent you'd use the word genocide, but it has been used there by the Han, I think. My Chinese history is not great, so I know the basics, but timeline. That's like in the 900s AD. But eventually they then again gradually make their way down and settle in the mountainous regions of what is now what's now Laos and northern Vietnam or Vietnam. So up here. At this point in time, by this point in time, this map here, the French have taken over. In the mid-1800s, they decided to move in and said, we're going to be in charge, colonialism and all of that. So they had a couple different states that they set up there's some variety here. It's basically modern Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. Now, there is a whole story here about the French coming in, and during World War II, it gets complicated. Japanese kind of invade, and then they don't invade, and then they do. And ultimately, after the war, basically the long and short of it is the French rely on a lot of the locals that the French have their own issues in France to deal with, right? They can't send ground troops. They got to liberate their own country. And so eventually, locals here are kind of organized as, start this process of organizing to kick out the Japanese by the end of the war. And then the French come in and they say, great, let's go back to the way things were. And many of the people here say, well, we'd kind of like independence, right? It's a larger decolonization era here in Africa and Asia. This happens in a lot of places. And for the French, this is a very difficult conflict. In particular, the communist groups, the groups that are sort of aligned within communism, are really influential. Like they really take the forefront in trying to, kick out the French. The French are the bad guys. They're the overlords. We want our own country. And the French, do their best. They train local people. They put, boots on the ground of regular French soldiers and colonial soldiers there. And this leads to the First Indo-Chinese War. The Viet Minh are the Vietnamese, mostly Vietnamese, I believe, oriented group at this point, although it's sort of a wider group of sort of communist, socialist aligned people backed by the China and Soviet Union a little bit. This is the extent of their territory held and which they could attack. So that's pretty extensive. You can see the beginning of, and if you know about the history of the Vietnam War, you know this is coming. The French end up deciding they've had enough, and at the Geneva Conference in 1954, they decide to pull out. The conference is supposed to. The main idea was to settle the Korean War. The Korean War was over, but kind of not. You have North and South Korea. They were trying to figure out a way to kind of come to a long-term solution. Didn't really get a concrete solution there. But in Indochina, now we have the establishment of 4 individual countries: Laos, Cambodia, and a North and South Vietnam. The Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the north is communist, and the state of Vietnam in the south is going to be democratic. Or at least, in theory, that's how that was going to crack out. This also meant that the major powers, as part of these sort of negotiations, agree that Laos is neutral. Right, so the French pull out. They don't have soldiers on the ground. Americans are starting to get involved. Nominally, we pull out. China and Soviet Union say we're done. We're not going to respect the neutrality of Laos. North Vietnamese say they do, but they end up leaving troops there anyway. But it's hard to kind of enforce that. What ends up happening in Laos is that they have sort of a coalition government. Instead of, Vietnam where they split it, the communist and the not communist, here you have sort of this coalition government led by three half-brothers, which are called the Three Princes. I'm not going to get into try to pronounce their names. I'm just going to butcher them. But there they are. So one was a sort of more right-wing, sort of the French, the Western power on the bottom there, royalist. One was very left-wing and ends up kind of aligning himself with the Pathet Lao, which is the sort of, the communist sort of militia forces that are trying to overthrow the government and, create a kind of the principal antagonist to the government at this point. And then you have the neutralists who are just trying to stay out of it and keep us from, not Laos from being, becoming a Vietnam, essentially. They want to keep the fighting to a minimum and just kind of keep things moving and keep the status quo. And they're going to struggle to do that, but they ultimately, do their best. And this situation, I don't think it's necessarily get into the politics. I'm not going to continue to go through all the politics because it gets complicated. But the main thing is that you have in Laos this kind of complicated situation, right? And the U.S. actually looks at Laos and realizes this might actually be the big powder keg waiting to get lit off and create problems here. Vietnam is a problem, but like we have the division, right? So we can kind of do what we need to kind of keep things in check. But Laos, especially at this period in time, this is the the 50s. Containment is a big philosophy of American foreign policy. We need to contain communism, and so Laos might be the next domino to fall. So we can't have that happen. But at the same time, the U.S. is bound by agreements that say we can't have land troops. We can't have boots on the ground. There's they considered the possibility of having to send in troops, but they never that was never going to really happen. And so instead, what they do is they train, they funnel money through clandestine means, not officially, right? To train and arm groups within Laos to fight the communists on their behalf. And that's where you get groups like this. You have of course, the royalist government. Their army not super apparently effective. The Pathet Lao aren't really either. But it's the North Vietnamese that are coming into the country and creating problems that we really need to keep in check. And the answer to that ends up being groups like this. This is the 10th Battalion Infanterie, still a French influence here. And July 6, 1960. So the two people that are notable here, the guy there, that's Jack Matthews, who's a PEO advisor. The Program's Evaluation Office, which is what PEO stands for, was basically the paramilitary group that the United States sets up of, there's not official military officers, but they're former officers that are there to kind of oversee things, kind of direct and train people. And then, of course, you have Vang Pao, who at this point is Major Pao, but is going to be promoted within a couple years to become General Vang Pao. If you know anything about the Hmong community, he looms very large in a lot of ways as one of the big fathers, the big leaders of that group. Now, there are other groups too. The Hmong are not the only ones that are armed and kind of organized. They did organize them around ethnic groups. But these sort of hill tribesmen, mountainous people like the Hmong become sort of the main line against the communist incursions in Laos because we can't have the Americans there. These special guerrilla units, is which they called them, SGUs, were responsible for a bunch of different things. So on one hand, you have to defend the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The North Vietnamese are the real issue. They're the regulars, and they are, especially as the United States gets bogged down further into this war in Vietnam, they increasingly look for alternative ways to get men and material down to the front and past enemy lines to kind of hinder the issue, like the Viet Cong and all that sort of thing. And so the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which goes back to the Indo-Chinese War the first time, goes into these nominally neutral countries. The United States can't send troops to secure the borders here, so we'll just go around them. So they go through the jungles. This is a map of the bombing that was done. The United States' response is often to just, carpet bomb places and try to, destroy the infrastructure to keep this from happening. And so you can see it's kind of along the Laos border here, and especially down here near the front lines. So it's the Hmong then that are the ones that are and groups like them. It's General Vang Pao's goal and his people's goal is to hinder the Ho Chi Minh Trail and attack the communists directly there. And then because of all this air, that's how the United States responds to this. And note that a lot of these the planes that they're dropping the bombs from are taking off from airfields in Thailand on the other side of Laos. So they're flying over Laos, dropping their bombs, and then trying to get back. And so when they get shot down, it is these groups, these SGUs, that go out and secure the downed pilots. If they parachute to safety, they would go there, secure them, and then get them to safety. And it's often said about these, the guys who did this, that they took a heavy toll on this. Like to get to one guy, even just to get to one of the pilots that were downed, they would lose 3, 4, 5 of their soldiers just getting there. So this was a rough job to do, but it's something that they did, and they did gladly. That was their responsibility, and certainly, yeah. And then there were strategic points that they were holding, such as Phao Phath. Americans call it Alima Site 85, which was basically a secret radar station on a mountain in Laos. And from there, they were able to kind of pinpoint targets for the bombing. And so, we got to keep that secret. And so that's like one of the interests here of. And this is kind of an American focused list in the sense of these are the stuff that Americans got out of the deal. But that's kind of what the Hmong were doing, and the troops in Laos that were fighting on our behalf. And yeah, these SGUs. This, keep in mind, this starts in like the late 50s, early 60s. We start to train them, and this goes on for like 14, 15 years. And this wasn't just something like, oh, we'll volunteer to go do this. It was expected that every household send somebody. If you didn't go, you better send one of your sons. And when they get back, you better send another son, because this is just necessary. And over the course of this time period, Laos has a population of like 3 million people. This is not a huge populous country. And so as the years go on, the attrition gets to the point where they're sending their like 13, 14, 15-year-old son this kid, can't even hold a rifle correctly, but they're the ones that are being sent out to do the job that needs to be done. And that's the price that the Hmong did, and other ethnic groups too. But for our purposes, the Hmong are the big ones, and they did this gladly. They thought the Americans told them it. It's also worth noting all of this was kept secret from the American public. Right? There's a reason that they call this the secret war, because they weren't talking about this on the news. And yet the Americans said, no, we're if you fight with us, we will get you a better tomorrow. We're not going to turn our back on you. And then we kind of turned our back on them. Vietnam, obviously, I'm sure all of you know, Vietnam became a bit of a quagmire. It became a bit of a slog, and we were, the confidence in the war being something we needed to do was declining day by day. And so in 1972, finally came to the point where the newly elected President Nixon says, all right, we're out. And we signed the Paris Peace Accords, which puts an end to the fighting in North and South Vietnam. And it also means that the United States is going to pull out of Vietnam within, like, there's a grace period of 2 years, right? If stuff happened in those 2 years, we would go back in and defend our allies. But after those 2 years, we're out of Vietnam, we're out of Laos, we're out of Cambodia. That's it. That meant giving up on the Hmong people. And again, after those 2 years, North Vietnam mobilizes, and the fall of Saigon, sort of that infamous event in 1975 in April. At the same time in Cambodia, there's the Khmer Rouge, which is the sort of Cambodian equivalent of the Pathet Lao or the Viet Minh. They take over, and sort of very bloody, taking over their capital city, also in April of 1975. And with the success of reunited Vietnam, they're able to, the North Vietnamese, the communists, then send troops to make sure that Laos follows suit, and it does. So this is the Pathet Lao entering the capital city in 1975 in December. But throughout the year, this is the writing's on the wall. And it's worth noting that the Pathet Lao were not shy. Like they were actually the communists were involved and actually led the government for part of this period. Everybody knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of time. And the Pathet Lao leadership and the press and everything, they were very clear. Oh, when we're in charge, we're going to kill all of you. Anybody who helped the Americans, we're going to kill you, your family. We're going to put you in camps. We're going to, this is happening. And so it's not a surprise that, as this happens, well, yeah. So this is Long Ting. I think that's pronounced. This is actually the secret city. This is like the base of operations for General Pao and these SGU groups and operations for the United States clandestine operations. It's actually the second biggest city in Laos during this time, so it's a big place. Maybe not quite so secret, but anyway, it falls to the Pathet Lao in May 15th of 1975, and 2 days earlier, the Americans, who by this point had mostly pulled out, did their best to evacuate as many of the Hmong, General Pao and his officers, and anybody they thought was most likely to face reprisals at the hand of the communists. In all, they airlifted over the course of 2 days about 3,500 people. And then, yeah, the new regime is not gentle. There are repressions. The Hmong people are rounded up. And what's interesting, and apparently nobody thought about this happening, but in retrospect, kind of makes sense. The Hmong decide many of them leave. They become refugees once again, and they head down to Thailand. If you're familiar with the story at all, I'm sure you've heard the stories about these harrowing journeys. And if you haven't, there are opportunities to learn. These stories have been told. I don't want to rehash them here, but it's leaving in the middle of the night with your family, and trying to stay hidden in the night, and in the day, just trying not to keep any noise, because if they got caught, they'd get shot, or worse, and getting to the border and crossing the Mekong into Thailand, they didn't bring boats, so they had to make makeshift floating devices and hope that it got to the other side. And it was a brutal experience, and obviously not something that they were taking pictures of, or there's no like documentation of this. It's just the memories that have been implanted on the people who went through it, and the stories that have been told. Although once they got to the United States, eventually, one of the ways, but they're here in this country now. They don't speak the language very well. How do you explain to the people that you're now neighbors with, this is what we went through? And one of the ways that they do that very, very effectively is the story quilts. And many of these story quilts have embroidered on them the experiences of the how they came to be there. Once they got across the Mekong into Thailand, they would put the refugee camps, which were, a problem for the locals there, because they didn't want these Hmong being part of their society. So they said, stay in these camps, which didn't have running water. It was, unsanitary. They were cramped together. There's no real future for these people. And many of them were evacuated to Western nations, particularly the United States takes the bulk of them. And many of them are settled. Although these camps continue until about, I think 2004 was when Thailand decided that they were going to repatriate and close the camps. And after a few years, they were all sent back to Laos, or many of them finally took the opportunity. But many people didn't want to leave. This was where they were from, and they still had family across the river, and they didn't know what the future was going to be. But for those who did make the trip over, they were settled in the United States, like I said, primarily, where they tend to settle in California, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And places like Wausau are host, some of the cities in Wisconsin. This is an article from 1979 spotlighting the first Hmong family in Merrill. By 1979, around this time, there was already about a dozen families here. And the statistics here are that in Wausau alone, there are 200 Hmong people living in 1980. There's about 400 in 1982. And about 800 in 1984. So, the population's growing. since 2000, it's been about 11% of the city of Wassa is Hmong or Southeast Asian ancestry, which is a good chunk of of the people here. And you know, it's again, I don't necessarily want to go through and take the opportunity to go through the experience of the Hmong. I won't speak for them because, you know, obviously I'm not from that. But I will say that, you know, not easy. While it's gotten easier as, you know, the generations and sort of the, you know, finding ways to navigate this sort of situation of being from an entirely different climate and culture in this new environment, and eventually they you know, they not, I want to say eventually, I don't want to make it sound like everything's fine now, because I'm sure that there are still tensions and there's still, you know, whether that's on a greater scale or as an individual of being here and being Hmong and having to sort of understand, you know, where you sit. I'm sure that that's a thing too. But certainly the Hmong have become an important part of Wassa. You know, here they are in 1984 marching in the parade for when we were designated an all-American city. And certainly continue to be, especially today, you know, as the generations have gone on and become more important here. You know, a big part of our business community here are, you know, education, medical, all that sort of stuff, right? And that brings us back to this statue, which is in many ways the culmination of all of that, right? It's not, it is on the surface a memorial to those soldiers who took part and actually fought in Laos. But it's also a really good explanation of why the Hmong people would not be here if it wasn't for these people. If it wasn't for the Americans saying, we want you to fight the communists, and for them to say, yes, we're going to do this, it wasn't for the United States turning our back on them. I mean, you know, it's debatable about whether there's anything we could have done or if that was, you know, something we would ever have been able to honor. But, you know, that all contributes to the exact reason why the Hmong are here. And so this isn't just a, you know, thank you to the veterans, the people who served. This serves as an explanation for the Hmong community's existence here, both for, you know, outsiders to understand who they are and why they're here, and also just to reaffirm this is who they are and this is why, you know, this is the Hmong community. And I think it's also worth noting that the recognition of this relationship and the acknowledgement of saying, yeah, we want to have this statue alongside these other statues, and I keep saying statues, memorials and other memorials to veterans here on the same level on the courthouse grounds, I think speaks to what, you know, the ideal, you know, reality, what we should strive for inclusion and you know, to allow and recognition of our neighbors, even if they aren't, you know, descended from Civil War veterans or what have you. So anyway, I think that's probably, I've rambled on a bit too much here, but so I'll leave it there. I'll check questions in just a second, but that's the history here. I'll just give you sort of heads up. Next week, we're going to continue our monumental history, and Kathy Volkman will be guest lecturing here as presenting, and she's going to be talking about the mausoleum at Pine Grove Cemetery, which is itself a kind of different take on what we've been doing in terms of what a memorial is, but it definitely fits the bill. So that'll be at 12:30 on Thursday, as always, and yeah, right here on Facebook and YouTube Live. So with that, I'm going to, let's see here, just go back to the beginning maybe. There we go. Let's see if any questions, comments, I'm going to check here, but if not, I'm going to say thanks for watching. I hope I was really concerned about this. This is a topic that I didn't want to, you know, misrepresent. So I hope that you learned something and that you enjoyed the presentation here. And hopefully next time you see the statue, you'll be able to, you know, you're driving past, you'll have a better appreciation for what it is and where it came from. So yeah. All right. Well, I think that's probably good. Thanks so much for watching again. It means a lot that you guys watch us, whether it's live or after the fact. And we'll look to see you next time, next week. So